rise and fall of ocean waves could easily hide from sight the ships, more than this, that sail the high seas, the brave sailor from stem to stern. Seas like this, he would be hanging on for dear life. Yet in the days of sail, no wind meant aimless drifting, some thought perhaps forever. The behavior of oceans received close attention during the 1400s. As the science of navigation emerged, it led to the start of the age of exploration. Henry the Navigator and the sea captains that followed him collected and mapped the patterns of wind and ocean currents, information of great importance to such discoveries as Columbus and the New World, Da Gama and the route to India, and the Atlantic voyages of other explorers. This study of navigation helped to give Spain and Portugal a commanding lead in early exploration, so much so that a boundary line was urged by the Pope and agreed to, dividing all discoveries between only these two countries. Lands to the west were to be Spain's, to the east, Portugal's. But how would other countries take this news? As the 1400s closed, the long wars between feudal states had come to an end, leaving these neighboring countries more unified and strong, able to turn their energies outward. Leading the Renaissance, this vigorous period of awakening, were strong kings. They too had ambitions, but would they defy the Pope and challenge either Spain or Portugal? Like many others from the Mediterranean, Giovanni Caboto from Genoa was attracted to the challenging Atlantic. Making his new home in Bristol, England's leading port, he changed his name to John Cabot. Little is known of this man. None of his maps or journals have been found. But it is a matter of history that Cabot received an impressive send-off in 1497. England, too, wanted prizes in this new business of exploration. One little ship, the Matthew, was all that sailed. To avoid encroaching on Spanish claims and risking war, Cabot's plan was to take a northerly route to Asia. After 7 cold weeks of sailing, land was sighted. Soon, John Cabot was ashore, claiming this land for England. It was barren and rocky, with but a few signs of human life. Unknown to Cabot and his men, they had reached the shore of a vast new continent. It was not Asia, but the coast of Canada. The only wealth found was from fishing grounds. Ships were actually slowed by fish that could be caught by the basket. Within a few years, men of several nations were fishing on these grand banks, but paying no heed to the continent that lay nearby. Spain had warned them away. Cabot was long dead before England could give her attention to settling his discovery. Excluded from the New World by Spain's warnings, England turned instead to European wars to test her growing strength and confidence. Meanwhile, English merchants and sailors were growing restless. They wanted a foothold in trade and exploration while there were still prizes to be claimed. By 1550, only the polar regions of the world had not been explored in the eager search for a trade route to Asia. Somewhere through the frozen Arctic, there might be a route, a northwest passage that England could control. A group of sea adventurers, among them Martin Frobisher, reasoned that if China could be reached by sailing south of the New World, there might well be a northern route too. But a long list of explorers failed in this search for the Northwest Passage. Among them, Martin Frobisher, John Davis, William Baffin, and the explorer who found this large bay. Henry Hudson was an honored English captain, but this proud pose hides an unsure, weak leader who more than once took orders from his men. Hudson, on several voyages financed by an English trading company, sought a more direct route to China, straight north, trying to weave a path through icebergs over the North Pole. But each time he ran into solid mountains of ice instead of the hoped-for open polar sea. In these first years of the 1600s, Holland was another country keenly interested in exploration. The Dutch had spent the previous century fighting for independence or building ships for her powerful neighbors. Excited now by freedom and hoping to find a trade route to China, Dutch merchants hired Henry Hudson in 1609. But they were not Chinese who saw the crew of the Half Moon and Henry Hudson going ashore, giving the Dutch their first claim in the New World, and to begin a most important industry, the fur trade. Hudson was encouraged that the river might be the Northwest Passage. He sailed until narrowing banks closed his way. The next year, Hudson, ordered to explore only for his native England, again sailed northern waters on the ship the Discovery. But after months of wandering, the ship was finally trapped by ice. The crew spent a difficult northern winter, made worse by a captain who seemed unable to handle men. In time, a threat that faced Hudson on each voyage raised its ugly head: mutiny. Hudson, with his 14-year-old son and several loyal men, were cast adrift in the cold bay they had discovered. It was a certain and cruel death, a tragic end for a great explorer. Hudson had made claims for two nations, the lands around Hudson's Bay for England, and the area of New York State for Holland. The failure of explorers to find a northwest passage to Asia through the shores of the New World led to the idea of establishing settlements here. Exploration would then be easier, and bases could protect discoveries. But the strongest motive was the hope of finding great wealth like that found by Spain in land to the south. Sir Humphrey Gilbert and a group of hopeful English settlers reached Newfoundland, but gave up not long after. Sir Walter Raleigh organized several other attempts to settle, but further south in Virginia. These too failed, partly because of hostile Indians, partly because England was concerned with something else. The sound of steel and cannon had been growing louder in skirmishes between English and Spanish sailors. With growing confidence, English captains such as John Hawkins and the handsome, reckless Francis Drake tangled with Spanish galleons, seizing valuable cargo. A voyage taken by Drake in his ship, the Golden Hind, proved this sea dog to be a great navigator as well as a thorn in the side of Spain. Rounding South America, he raided Spanish settlements on the west coast. Realizing the enemy would be waiting for his return, he headed out across the Pacific. 2 years and 10 months after he had set out, Drake arrived home, honored by his queen as the first Englishman to have sailed around the world. The Golden Hind's rich prize and great voyage symbolized the growing strength and pride of England and the growing annoyance of Spain and its king. Philip II of Spain ruled Portugal, Holland, parts of Italy, and was obviously interested in adding England to his prospering empire. Fortunately, England was led by one of its wisest monarchs ever, Queen Elizabeth. And she had a navy that blocked Spanish ambitions. The year is 1588. This is the Spanish Armada, 130 ships spread out side by side for a full mile. But the English knew this battle was coming. With clever tactics, smaller, more manageable ships, and better guns, the English chase and batter their opponents. Only half of the once-proud armada will limp through storms back to Spain, leaving now the English sailor, the master of the seas. After this great victory, England could return to her plans for settling the New World. By the year 1700, she had established a string of English colonies and was staking out the area of Hudson's Bay for her new fur trade. But in the south, Spain still had a firm foothold after 2 centuries of settlement. And near to English claims, a new breed of explorer from France had been struggling into the heart of the vast continent. These 3 competing nations faced a new world unknown yet promising. For settlers, it could mean great wealth and new opportunities. For kings, to win this land meant power. Was this wilderness a prize worth fighting for?